The British monarchy just dropped a constitutional bombshell that has Westminster in absolute chaos. King Charles has made a decision so unprecedented, so earth-shattering, that Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is scrambling behind closed doors in full panic mode. And here's the part that nobody saw coming. Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party are now positioned to seize control of Britain's political future. What happened just minutes ago has changed everything. The establishment is terrified, the media is in meltdown, and the British people are waking up to a reality that seemed impossible just days ago. This is not a drill. This is not speculation. This is happening right now, and by the time you finish watching this, you'll understand exactly why the next 72 hours will determine the fate of the United Kingdom. The news broke less than an hour ago, and already the shockwaves are rippling through every corner of British politics. King Charles, in an extraordinary move that has left constitutional experts speechless, has directly intervened in the ongoing political crisis that has paralysed Westminster for weeks. Sources inside Buckingham Palace confirmed that His Majesty held an emergency meeting with senior advisers this morning, and what emerged from that meeting has sent Keir Starmer's Labour government into complete disarray. The Prime Minister, who only months ago was celebrating his landslide victory, now finds himself facing the biggest constitutional challenge of his career, and he's losing ground by the minute. Here's what we know happened behind those palace walls. King Charles, deeply concerned about the growing disconnect between the government and the British people, exercised a rarely used royal prerogative that allows the monarch to intervene when parliamentary democracy faces existential threat. Now, before the establishment media tries to spin this as some kind of ceremonial formality, understand what this really means. The King has essentially signalled that he no longer has confidence in Starmer's ability to govern effectively. This isn't about party politics, this is about the survival of British democracy itself, and Charles has just put his crown on the line to defend it. The timing of this intervention is absolutely critical, and it's no coincidence. Nigel Farage and Reform UK have been building momentum that terrifies the traditional political class. Recent polling data that the mainstream media has been desperately trying to suppress shows Reform UK surging to unprecedented levels of support. We're talking about numbers that suggest Farage could actually become the next Prime Minister if elections were held today. The establishment laughed at him. They mocked him. They tried to silence him. And now they're watching in horror as millions of ordinary British citizens rally behind his message of genuine reform and national sovereignty. But here's where it gets even more explosive. Multiple sources are now confirming that King Charles and Nigel Farage have been in direct communication. Yes, you heard that right. The monarch and the leader of the opposition movement that threatens to dismantle the entire political establishment have been speaking. What were those conversations about? What assurances were given? What promises were made? The palace isn't talking, and Farage is remaining strategically silent, but the implications are staggering. This suggests a level of coordination that nobody in Westminster saw coming, and it explains why Keir Starmer's inner circle is in absolute panic mode right now. Starmer's response has been telling. Rather than addressing the British people directly, rather than explaining his vision for the country, he's been locked in emergency meetings with his top advisors and party leadership. They're not discussing policy. They're not discussing how to serve the people better. They're discussing political survival. How do we spin this? How do we control the narrative? How do we stop the bleeding before it's too late? These are the questions being asked in Downing Street right now, and the fact that they have no good answers should tell you everything you need to know about how dire the situation has become. The mainstream media is working overtime to downplay what's happening, but they can't hide the truth anymore. Social media is exploding with reactions from ordinary British citizens who are celebrating this development. People are tired of being ignored. They're tired of promises that never materialise. They're tired of watching their country transformed without their consent. And now, with King Charles taking this unprecedented step, millions of Britons feel like someone in a position of real authority is finally listening to their concerns. That's powerful. That's dangerous to the establishment. And that's exactly why they're so desperate to suppress this story. Let's talk about what Nigel Farage brings to this equation, because the establishment wants you to believe he's just a troublemaker, a populist, someone who should be dismissed and ignored. But the reality is far different. Farage has been proven right on issue after issue that the political class got catastrophically wrong. Brexit, he was right. Immigration, he was right. Economic sovereignty, he was right. The European Union's trajectory, he was right. Time and time again, the man they called a joke, a fringe figure, a conspiracy theorist, has been vindicated by events, and the British people haven't forgotten that. Reform UK isn't just another political party. It represents something much bigger, much more fundamental. It represents the voice of millions who feel completely abandoned by the traditional Conservative and Labour establishments. These are people who work hard, pay their taxes, follow the rules, and watch as their concerns are dismissed as bigotry or ignorance by elites who have never faced the consequences of their own policies. Farage speaks their language. He understands their frustrations, and most importantly, he's not afraid to challenge the consensus that has failed Britain for decades. That's why he's dangerous to the establishment. That's why they fear him. And that's why this moment with King Charles seemingly opening the door to fundamental change represents their worst nightmare come true. The constitutional implications of what's unfolding cannot be overstated. Britain operates under an unwritten constitution, a system that relies heavily on precedent, convention, and the delicate balance between monarchy and parliament. What King Charles has done is push the boundaries of that system in ways that haven't been tested in generations. Some constitutional scholars are already warning that this could trigger a crisis. Others are arguing that this is exactly what the Constitution allows for in moments of national emergency. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But here's what matters most. The people support it. When the monarch acts with the backing of popular will against a government that has lost the confidence of the people, that's not a constitutional crisis. That's constitutional democracy working exactly as it should. Now let's dig into what Keir Starmer is actually panicking about, because this goes far deeper than just one royal intervention. Starmer's government has been hemorrhaging support since almost the moment it took office. The promises made during the campaign have collided brutally with the reality of governing, and the British people are not impressed with what they're seeing. On immigration, the numbers keep rising despite promises of control. On the economy, growth remains stagnant while taxes increase. On public services, the NHS is still in crisis and waiting times continue to climb. On energy, bills remain astronomical while ideological commitments to net zero make the situation worse. This isn't just policy disagreement. This is a fundamental failure to deliver on the mandate the people gave Labour, and they know it. Behind closed doors, Labour MPs are terrified about what comes next. Many of them won their seats, not because voters loved Labour, but because voters were exhausted with the Conservatives after 14 years of broken promises and incompetent governance. It was a protest vote, a cry for change, not an endorsement of Starmer's vision. And now that the reality of Labour governance is setting in, many of those same voters are having severe buyer's remorse. The polling reflects this. Starmer's personal approval ratings have collapsed. Labour's lead in the polls has evaporated, and Reform UK, the party that the establishment dismissed as irrelevant, is now within striking distance of major electoral breakthrough. The electoral map that looked so comfortable for Labour just months ago now looks like a minefield ready to explode. Here's what really has Starmer's team panicking beyond just the poor polling numbers. They're looking at the same data that shows Nigel Farage isn't just popular with traditional Conservative voters. He's breaking through with working class voters, with young men who feel abandoned by mainstream politics, with small business owners who are drowning in regulations and taxes, with pensioners who watch their savings destroyed by inflation. Farage is building a genuinely cross-class coalition that threatens the entire foundation of British party politics. As we've known it, this isn't just about winning or losing the next election. This is about the potential complete realignment of British politics around new fault lines that the old parties cannot compete on. The establishment's response has been predictable and pathetic in equal measure. Rather than addressing the genuine concerns that drive people toward Reform UK, they've doubled down on the smear tactics and moral condemnation that stopped working years ago. Call them racists, call them fascists, call them far-right extremists. The problem is that nobody believes it anymore. When you call millions of ordinary, decent British citizens those names just because they want controlled borders and national sovereignty, you lose all credibility. The British people have figured out that these labels aren't arguments, they're weapons wielded by a political class that has run out of actual ideas and is desperately trying to maintain control through moral intimidation rather than democratic persuasion. King Charles understands something that Keir Starmer and his advisors apparently don't. The monarchy survives by maintaining connection with the people, by reading the national mood, by understanding when change is necessary rather than resisting it. The Queen understood this throughout her reign. She adapted, she evolved. She maintained the institution by respecting the will of the British people, even when it went against her personal preferences. Charles is following that same wisdom now. He sees where the country is heading. He sees the anger. He sees the frustration. He sees the demand for change. And rather than standing with a failing government against the people, he's signalling that fundamental reform might be necessary. That's not unconstitutional. That's the constitutional monarchy working exactly as it should. What happens next depends entirely on how the major players respond to this moment. Starmer has a choice. He can dig in, try to ride out the storm, hope that this blows over and people forget about it. That's the typical politician's response, and it's almost certainly what his advisors are telling him to do. Or he can do something truly radical, actually listen to what the British people are saying, acknowledge where his government has failed, and make genuine changes to course correct before it's too late. Based on everything we've seen from Starmer so far, which option do you think he'll choose? Exactly. He'll try to weather the storm, protect his position and hope for the best. And that's precisely why his government is doomed. Nigel Farage, meanwhile, is playing this perfectly. He's not overreaching. He's not making wild claims or predictions. He's letting events unfold, letting Starmer make mistakes, letting the establishment oppose itself. Farage has been in politics long enough to know that sometimes the best move is patience. Let your opponents defeat themselves. Let the contradictions in their position become obvious to everyone. Build your support steadily and systematically, rather than trying to force a breakthrough before the moment is right. Everything about his approach right now suggests a man who believes his time is coming and is content to let the process play out naturally. The Reform UK infrastructure is being built as we speak. Constituency associations are forming across the country. Candidates are being recruited and vetted. Campaign materials are being prepared. Fundraising is accelerating as donors who previously stayed on the sidelines decide that reform might actually have a shot at real power. This isn't just protest politics anymore. This is a serious political movement preparing for government. And that preparation, combined with Labour's collapse and the Conservative Party's continued irrelevance, creates the perfect storm for political transformation that seemed impossible just a year ago. The Conservative Party, by the way, is in complete denial about their own role in creating this situation. They still haven't grasped that their 14 years in government, their betrayal of Brexit, their failure to control immigration, their mismanagement of the economy, and their abandonment of conservative principles is exactly why Reform UK exists and is thriving. They think they can win back voters by moving slightly to the right on a few issues while maintaining the same fundamentally globalist managerial approach that failed so catastrophically. They don't understand that the British people aren't looking for conservative light anymore. They're looking for actual change, actual reform, actual representation. Until the Tories grasp that reality, they'll continue bleeding support to Reform UK with no end in sight. So what does all of this mean for the immediate future of British politics? We're looking at a potentially explosive few months ahead. King Charles has made his move. Nigel Farage is positioned better than ever before. Keir Starmer's government is in crisis mode, and the British people are watching all of this unfold with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Hope that real change might finally be possible. Apprehension about what that change might look like and whether it will actually deliver what they've been promised for so long. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical because they will determine whether this moment becomes a turning point or just another episode in the endless political drama that never actually changes anything. The establishment media is going to work overtime to control the narrative around what King Charles has done. They'll try to minimise it, contextualise it, explain it away as something less significant than it actually is. They'll bring on constitutional experts who will drone on about precedent and convention and royal prerogatives in ways designed to bore you into submission rather than inform you about what's really happening. They'll interview Labour MPs who will assure everyone that this is all perfectly normal and nothing to be concerned about. They'll give platform to critics of Nigel Farage who will recite the usual talking points about populism and division and danger to democracy. All of it is designed to make you doubt what your own eyes can see and what your own instincts tell you is true. But here's what they can't control: social media, independent media, and the conversations happening in pubs and living rooms and workplaces across Britain right now. People are talking about this, they're excited about it, they're hopeful about it, and no amount of establishment spin can change that reality. The genie is out of the bottle. Millions of British citizens now believe that fundamental change might actually be possible, that their voices might actually matter, that the system might actually be forced to respond to their concerns rather than just ignoring them. That's powerful. That's dangerous to the status quo. And that's exactly why the next few months will determine whether Britain continues down the path of managed decline or charts a new course toward genuine national renewal. The international implications of what's happening in Britain right now are also significant and being carefully watched by establishments across the Western world. If Nigel Farage and Reform UK actually succeed in breaking through to real power, if they actually manage to implement their vision of national sovereignty, controlled immigration, economic independence and democratic accountability, it would send shockwaves through every Western democracy. It would prove that the populist movements the establishment has been fighting for years aren't just protest votes that can be ignored or managed. It would prove that there's a genuine alternative to the globalist consensus that has dominated Western politics for decades. And it would inspire similar movements across Europe and beyond to believe that they too can actually win, actually govern, actually change things. That's why the stakes here go far beyond just British domestic politics. This is about whether democratic nations can actually be governed according to the will of their own people, or whether power truly rests with unelected international institutions, bureaucratic establishments, and elite consensus that ordinary citizens have no ability to challenge or change. Britain has always been at the forefront of these battles: the Magna Carta, parliamentary democracy, the defeat of tyranny in 2 world wars, Brexit, and now potentially the next chapter in the ongoing struggle between popular sovereignty and elite rule. The British people have a history of rising to moments like this, of choosing freedom over comfort, of defending their rights and liberties, even when told they're being foolish or dangerous or irresponsible. Keir Starmer's panic is understandable from his perspective. He worked his entire political career to reach number 10 Downing Street. He manoeuvred carefully through Labour's internal battles. He positioned himself as the moderate, sensible alternative after the Corbyn years. He led his party to electoral victory, and now, mere months into his premiership, he's facing the possibility that it could all come crashing down, not because of anything he did wrong necessarily, but because the British people have decided they want something fundamentally different than what any traditional party can offer them. That's got to be terrifying for him personally, and for everyone who tied their political fortunes to his success. But here's the thing about democracy that politicians sometimes forget. It's not about them. It's not about their careers or their ambitions or their place in history. It's about the people they're supposed to serve. And when a government loses touch with those people, when it stops listening to their concerns, when it pursues agendas that the people never asked for and don't want, the people have every right to withdraw their consent and demand new leadership. That's not a crisis of democracy. That's democracy working. That's the people exercising the power that ultimately belongs to them, not to the politicians who temporarily hold office. The coming days will reveal whether Britain's institutions are strong enough and flexible enough to handle this moment of democratic expression. Can the system accommodate genuine reform without collapsing? Can power actually transfer peacefully to voices that the establishment has spent years trying to marginalise and suppress? Can the will of the people actually prevail against the entrenched interests that benefit from the status quo? These are the questions that will be answered one way or another very soon. And the answers will determine not just Britain's future, but potentially the future of democracy across the Western world. King Charles has made his move. History will judge whether it was wise or reckless, visionary or destructive. But one thing is certain. He's changed the game completely. Nigel Farage now has an opening that seemed impossible just days ago. The establishment is scrambling to respond, and the British people are watching to see if this moment of possibility becomes genuine transformation or just another false dawn in the long struggle for democratic accountability and national sovereignty. The next 72 hours will be absolutely critical. Stay tuned, stay informed. And whatever you do, don't let the mainstream media tell you that what you're seeing isn't really happening. It is, and it's only just beginning.